And now the restoration process begins. And so we've got the hood off of this old car, and we're about ready to do some engine work here on, can I just say, guys, this one is a beauty, isn't it? I mean, I'm loving just standing here. This is one beautiful car, but we've got the hood off, and we're about to do some engine work. So welcome, dear brother, to phase one of the Restored Man process. You'll recall in our last session together, we kind of began with the starting point. We did some assessments. We kind of talked about desire a little bit, and that gave us the ability to set a baseline for this restoration process, a beginning point about where you're at spiritually and emotionally and where I'm at. And so now we're going to begin our 4 phases with the first phase of restoration called Know God as Father. We'll eventually move into knowing self, living in brokenness and humility, which is phase 3, and then phase 4, walk with God in the disciplines. But for today, I want us to dig into knowing God as Father, the first phase of the restoration process. And by the way, as we talk about that, I hope that you're enjoying the story of Daisy in the book. You know, I never had much of a grandfather. I don't know if you did. But the thought of restoring an old car with my grandfather is kind of a cool idea. So I hope you're liking that story as you begin each chapter. But this is that part of the restoration process where I think we're going to be challenged to dig into the engine. This is kind of where we're going to need to get our hands dirty and deal with what I've found to be, both in my own life and in walking with a lot of guys, maybe one of the most important parts of the restoration process. You see, I'm convinced that the most important human relationship that we have as men is that of our relationship with our earthly dad. I've found that in my own journey of trying to grow closer to God and others, and also in walking with a lot of guys over the years. And by about the age of about 10 or 11, our image of God is in place, and that's primarily based on our earthly dads. It just shapes so much of our lives. And so this is going to be a part of the restoration process where you're going to be invited to kind of get into the engine work of your life, into your heart, into your story, particularly related to your relationship with your earthly dad. You know, you may find as you read through the book that your story is a little more like my dad's story. A lot of brokenness there in his relationship with his dad, being abandoned, rejected, kind of tossed aside. And so those are kind of what we call father wounds that are direct wounds. You can put a finger on it. You can go back to a specific event or time. So your story may be like his, or your story may be a bit more like mine. You know, a really good dad, a lot of great memories, but at the same time, even with that story, our dads are human. They're imperfect. They have sin issues, and they're broken. And so with that story, we still have wounds, we still have hurts. It's a little more of what we call indirect father wounds. And I want to invite you, no matter what your story is with your dad, to really dig into your relationship with him. As you dive into the book, you'll see in that section there are several questions about your relationship with your dad. And how did your dad handle his anger? How did he grieve? How did your dad handle sexuality? You know, did he have the talk with you? Or was it kind of a topic we didn't cover? So I invite you to really dig into that and explore how much of your dad is in you, how he's affected the way you walk with God, the way you do your emotional life, and to really explore your relationship with your earthly dad. But then you'll see in the next part of the chapter where we're going to spend some time in Luke chapter 15. And you know, this is what we've come to know as the story of the prodigal son. I kind of like to call it the story of the loving father, because I think he is the person in the story that Jesus is trying to highlight to say, hey, this is my father. This is now your father through me. And so as you dig into that story, you're going to find those 2 sons. One's the prodigal that kind of went off to a distant land and sowed his wild oats and came back home. But then there's also the older brother who he stayed home, kind of glossed over his issues, but never really found a home with the Father. And so as you dig into that story, you're going to find yourself, just like I have, in both of those brothers. But I think also, I hope that we can see truly God as Father. What does it mean for God to father us? You know, in the last, 10 or 15 years of walking in this and dealing with a lot of brokenness in myself, I found that asking God to father me, and even praying that each day, God, father me through this hardship, through this relationship, it's brought a lot of peace to life, because I realize that I'm not on my own. I can trust God to father me. And so I want you to explore and really dig into Luke 15, maybe with a fresh set of eyes like you never have before. And so phase one is to know God as Father, to deal with our earthly dads, and to unpack who God is as Father. And I want to invite you to get your hands dirty, dig into the engine, dig into your soul, and truly see what it looks like to begin this restoration process. And I pray that you truly begin to know God as your Father.